All right, Dan Lloyd, here we are in late June. I am going to imagine that your month of July gets a little bit busy, so I appreciate the time that you're lending me today to chat. I'm always curious, and I feel like it's an inevitability in these podcasts, in talking to cyclists. I'm always curious about how somebody gets into the sport of cycling in the first place. So can you tell me how once upon a time the bicycle bug nipped you in the behind?
I can, yeah. For me, it came when I was 13 years old, and I'd had bikes before that, obviously, but I was around at a mate's house, and his uncle used to give him copies of MB UK, Mountain Bike UK magazine, which at the time was already huge. So they were old issues, but I started flicking through them, and it was just about the time when mountain biking was really taking off, and the bikes looked pretty cool, and I pestered my dad for months on end to get a bike, but I think he thought it might be just, spend a few £100 on a bike and it's a waste of money because I use it a few times and that's that. But he eventually got me one at Christmas. I got a Marin Muirwoods blue and silver bike. I think it was about £419. Don't know what that is in today's money. And then the following year, I found a local race. So in the back of MB UK magazine, they used to have a calendar of all the mountain bike races.
Yep.
There's one a few miles away. I did the under-16s, even though I think I was still 13, and finished quite some way down. But that was where the racing bug started. And actually, the school friend that I started racing with, he used to beat me in those first few races, and he stopped riding at a point. But I rode Manchester to London for charity last Sunday as we're recording this.
Yeah.
He came over for it. He now lives in Perth in Australia, and I haven't seen that guy since I was 18, which is 27 years ago.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. But that was my introduction to sort of proper cycling and pinning a number on my back, actually on my handlebars.
Right. What a hoot to make that connection from the person who literally inserted cycling in your life once upon a time.
Yeah.
And how about as you make your way through the early ranks? I mean, obviously you stuck around with it quite a ways. You and I eventually crossed paths in 2009. So not to gloss over that period, but what is early racing look like? How do you eventually call professional cycling, the pursuit of professional cycling, a career?
So I continued focusing on mountain biking for quite a long time. It was quite helpful that I was so shit at the start, because it meant that I was always sort of progressing gradually.
Yeah.
It's better than winning at the start and trying to maintain it through to junior years and seniors, where it gets a lot harder. So I always felt like I was making sort of small improvements, but significant ones each year. But I did get to a point where I think probably second year senior, I'd been putting quite a lot into it. I'd been effectively riding full-time, or at least with a part-time job to keep me going financially. And I was sort of scraping top tens in the elite category in the national series in the UK. But I sort of decided that the money was kind of coming out of mountain biking, and I wasn't talented enough to be one of the top guys that would get the money that was in it, enough to make a career out of it. So if we sort of rewind a couple of years from there, I'd started doing some road riding and road racing just to supplement the training for the mountain biking. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of been combining the two. But I just came to this conclusion that if I was going to have any chance of being paid to ride my bike in the future, that I'd need to switch over to the road. So I did that, and I went to France for half a season in 2001, where I was teammates with Russell Downing, who was later at Team Sky. Mm-hmm. Started off all right and then went downhill. Somebody told me before I went, it was the first time I'd been properly full-time on the bike, and they said, just remember, when you go full-time, it gives you more time to recover as much as it gives you more time to train. But I sort of seemed to take that to the extreme and spent a lot of my time sleeping and recovering, and probably not enough actually training. So I think my form just descended over the 3 months I was there. And then, spent another year in France the year after that, then Italy with a very small British third-tier pro team, not being really paid. A couple of years in Belgium, which was an eye-opener for the Flanders team. Then a year in Asia. Then a year for another British pro team in 2007. Didn't have a team in 2008, but I was given a last-minute offer by Anne Post, there's a third division pro team. And it was that year where Cervélo came along. And I mean, to be honest, I'd been given so many false promises by that point in my life that I didn't really believe it was a thing. You know, I'm sure you had the same call. Like, we've got this team we're setting up. It's got the Tour de France win and the Tour de France green jersey in it. And you think, I don't think I believe this. Yeah. In fact, I don't think I believed it until we turned up in Switzerland late in 2008 and joined them. But yeah, that was my progress. I think I often talk to other people and say that if I was looking back at myself in a similar situation, I think I would have told myself to throw in the towel in my mid-20s, because, you know, I could easily have got to 2008. Cervélo didn't come along, and I spent multiple years and got to my late 20s without much to show for it. Mm-hmm. So I was fortunate that it came along when it did and allowed me to have a few years at the top, and that's kind of led on to what I'm doing now.
Sure. That is wild. Did you have, in, call it, the final half dozen years leading up to 2009, as you're sort of jumping around literally the world to Italian teams and Asian teams, I mean, you obviously must have been piecing together results so as to get noticed by the eventual manager that's putting together the Cervelo TestTeam. So what were your strengths? What do you suppose allowed you to land on Cervelo TestTeam, which, you know, it was a pretty hodgepodge collection of riders, but it also was a very talented group of riders?
Well, yeah, good for you and I, Ted, that they spent so much on the top names that they needed to sort of find the depth.
How little will you ride for?
That were going to come quite cheap just to make the numbers up. Sure. I'd say my strengths were like bike handling and positioning, and then sort of short, sharp climbs. So anything from like 1 to 3 minutes. But in terms of what kept me going, I think I would always have like 1 or 2 or maybe 3 times per season where I was really on it, and I just looked around me and thought, you know what, on my day, I'm sort of reasonably competitive. Like, I'm not the best of the best, but I can be up there with some decent level pros who are making a living from this. And so it was enough to kind of keep me going and keep me hoping that if I kept plugging away, you know, something might come along eventually, which thankfully it did. But like I said, I could equally have ended up with nothing after a lot of work. That said, I was reasonably confident that I could plough myself into something else outside of cycling, you know, whenever I decided to stop. And, you know, for me, racing in those teams abroad, it was a bit like going to uni, really. Mm-hmm. You know, I was kind of educating myself in cycling mainly, and a little bit of language, but, you know, seeing the world and getting to know people like you do when you're living with them full time. I loved those years. They were great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're a transformative period in one's life. Obviously you get hassled now and again on the show about mentioning Cervelo TestTeam in commentary, but this is going to be a safe place for it, and we're not going to talk too much at length. But I look back on that team, and even at the time, it seemed like it was a special collection of riders, and we were doing something, in a way, futuristic. I mean, it just sort of happened in this glimpse of 2 years. When you look back at that time as a 2-year period of your life, which is a sliver of time, what stands out? What's interesting to you? What are those nuggets?
Quite a lot.
Yeah.
My memory is not particularly good, but I've got a few distinct memories from Cervélo. The first one was arriving in Switzerland for that kind of pre-season get-together where we got to know each other as riders and staff, but also the sponsors. Yep. You know, people won't know, but it was a team where obviously Cervélo was the main sponsor, and they were having to put in quite a lot of money to be the name and have the rides that they did in the team. But then every sub-sponsor was putting in a fairly significant amount of money. The idea being that we worked really well between companies and riders to sort of help develop and promote products. So we had, you know, Vittoria and Zip and Speedplay and ZipFit Nutrition and a multitude of other sponsors. But I remember arriving in Switzerland, and it was one of those travel days where I'd sort of missed lunch. So I got there and checked into my room. And when I got into my room, you probably had the same. I don't know if you remember this, but there were 2 really nice boxes of Swiss chocolates in the room. And so because I'd missed lunch and it was quite some way until dinner, I started devouring like most of this box of chocolates.
Yeah.
About an hour later, I went downstairs and checked with, I think it was Thomas Campana, the team manager, like, is there a room list? Do you know who I'm rooming with? And he said, I don't know, but the list is up on the wall. So I went over to the lifts and looked at the list, and next to my name in the same room was Carlos Sastre, who'd won the Tour de France about 3 months earlier. I was like, oh my God, I'm rooming with the Tour de France winner. I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And then about 30 seconds or a minute later, I thought, oh shit, I've devoured like most of a box of chocolates. Like, he's going to think I'm not professional.
Yeah.
I went back up to the room and I devised a strategy, which was, I'm going to finish the rest of my box and get rid of the evidence in the bin in the hallway, and then I'm going to move the remaining box to the centre of the desk, so it looks like we've just got one between us. Which is what I did. And then at the end of the camp, he saw that there was just one box between us and said, Dan, you take that one back to your wife as a gift, which was very kind of him.
Yeah,
and so I did that, told her I bought it. So that was like, I don't know if also, I was recounting this story the other day. Do you remember the name of the founder of Speed Play? I forget his name now.
I do. Richard Bryan.
Richard, yeah. But do you remember this, when we had that day in like a boardroom where they were all giving their speeches for their respective companies?
Yes.
I hope he doesn't listen to this, because he
it's gonna be great. Well, I want you to tell the story, and I'll fill in the blanks as I remember.
Okay, so we'd had quite a few speeches already, and Richard stood up, and he seemed really quite nervous about standing up and talking in front of people. So he was sort of stuttering a little bit at the start, and then he said, anyway, by the way, I just wanted to thank you very much for giving such a warm welcome to me and my wife, Barbara.
Yes.
And then he just stopped for what seemed like an eternity. And I was thinking, crikey, he's so nervous. And then when he restarted again, he said, so I'm so sorry. My wife's name isn't Barbara. It's Sharon.
Yeah, exactly.
We were like, oh my God. She's like,
sorry, his wife is right next to him. Yeah.
She was there.
Exactly.
But no, she was sat down, because I then remember him saying, because he at that point he completely lost his train of thought and couldn't really say anything for a while. So eventually he said, Sharon, would you mind sort of standing up and giving me a bit of a hand with the presentation? And she just like crossed her arms and said, no. And so he kind of got through the rest of the presentation. And at the end of it, he said, has anyone got any questions? Do you remember Ignatius put his hand up and he's like, yeah, who's Barbara?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So that was my recollection from that first get together. But you're right, it just seemed to be a weird group of people to put together, but for whatever reason, from day dot, everyone seemed to gel. And I think it helped, obviously, that we started winning from day dot as well with, I can't remember if it was California first or Qatar first, but it was a good start to the season, and that got the ball rolling.
Yeah, and then straight to the Giro. We're doing our inaugural Grand Tour, both as the team, and then it's my first Giro, it's your first Giro. And I think that first year we went on to win 5 stages, which is to this day kind of unbelievable for a Neo-Pro team. I think back on my Neo-Pro year, my introduction to Europe year, and it's almost like it was wasted on me, because I didn't have the education that we're provided now through modern media, through watching races, through Velo Viewer and all these apps. So it's almost as though I feel like I raced almost my entire career, but certainly the first few years with deer in the headlights, just bright, wide open eyes. And maybe the Grand Tour especially, because I had broken my collarbone at Tour California. So it was like, what'd I do? Amstel, Roman D, Giro. It was just like, welcome to Europe. What you had experience in Europe at that time. You'd done some races in Belgium. How about the Giro in particular? And then you were also certainly part of the Classics program. What do you remember from those periods, which brought so much success straight off the bat?
Classics were great. We started with Tour of Qatar, and we sort of dominated, except we couldn't get rid of Tom Bonin, and so I think we finished with 7 guys in the top 11 or something, but second, third, fourth, and 6th place rather than first. we carried the momentum on through the classics. I did the Tour of Flanders for the first time ever, which was certainly a sort of pinch myself moment to make sure I wasn't dreaming, because that was like always my dream race to do. Before the Giro, I can't remember if it was that year where I got slightly ill before it. I certainly couldn't start Amstel Gold that you did because I got some sort of fever the night before, and I'm not sure if it was a carry on from that, but either way, I remember being nervous about the Giro, first and foremost because it was my first 3-week race and you just don't know what you're getting yourself into. But secondly, because I hadn't actually felt that great beforehand. In fact, I think I'd rung the sports directors to sort of say I was a bit worried about doing it. But anyway, I'm glad I did because, it was an amazing experience. I mean, I don't know if you do the same, but I sometimes look back to remind myself of the length of the stages back in those Grand Tours.
Yeah.
I'm currently writing our preview show for the Tour de France, and the longest stage is 209 k's, but it's one of the flatter ones. But in that year's Giro d'Italia, there were multiple 230k plus stages, a couple of 250. I actually remember because I think it was that year's Ghent-Wevelgem was supposed to be 250k's, but the organisers hadn't got the right ranking or permission from the UCI, so they had to make a 35k neutral zone at the start, so that it became a race of less than 220 or whatever. And it felt so stupid because you got to the Giro and then there's all these stages that are way longer than 220.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was nervous. I remember just eating as much as I could at all times, and it was also really hot, wasn't it? And I remember the team doctors saying you need to get the electrolytes in and the salt, etc., which I did, but it meant I put on 4 kilos in 2 weeks. I started at 70 and I was at 70 because we were weighing ourselves every morning, weren't we?
I remember that. Yeah, you were the only rider putting on considerable weight.
Did you put weight on as well? I can't remember.
Within 1 or 2 kilo, certainly not 4. Yeah.
I don't know why it wasn't until I got to 4 kilos overweight that I started to think maybe I'm doing something wrong here.
Yeah. Oh man.
But anyway, it was a great experience. It's one that I won't forget, particularly the final stage that Carlos won, because he took 7 hours 20. I was half an hour behind. I don't know whether you were in my group or there was one more gruppetto behind, but it was like an 8-hour day for us, plus a 4-hour journey in the bus to the next hotel.
Yep. Yeah, I feel like that was a time of almost like a Grand Tour arms race of who could create the crazier races. And up until that point, the longest race I'd done was the Philly Classic in Philadelphia, and it's around 250 kilometers. And I just remember 3 stages consecutively that were above 250 kilometers, all deep into the mountains. So you can't really get your head wrapped around it until you're in it.
I've erased a lot of that pain from my memories. I haven't got like detailed memories of each day. Sometimes when I've been commentating, I'll look through and I'll find a town and it says it's been used in 2009 or 10, which were the years I did it. I've got absolutely no recollection whatsoever.
I had to do that with the Zolkalon. Someone's like, have you ever done it? I'm like, no, I'm certain I haven't. And lo and behold, yes, we did. In one of those years.
I do remember that because you got a fine for getting pushed up there.
I broke the
fair play prize. Yeah, we lost the fair play prize because of that.
Right.
Also because Jeremy Hunt signed the wrong name at the start on one stage. I think.
That's right. Oh man, I was so livid because like the Italians are smart enough to hang on to the motorcycles in the gruppetto, and I'm merely getting a push from a fan, and I'm the one because my passport is not Italian that gets us out of the fair play prize. Oh man, these are good slivers. So you ended up racing the Tour de France, not that year, is that correct? Was that 2010 that you raced the Tour?
Yeah, a year after, yeah, 2010.
And did you feel much progress in that second year as the team is gelling? I mean, obviously making it to do back-to-back tours, or Grand Tours rather.
Well, I wasn't supposed to do it. So the story behind that is I did the same sort of thing. I didn't do Qatar at the start of the year, but some early season races, then the classics. Then I did Paris-Nice that year, and then the Giro. Mm-hmm. The classics, then the Giro. And then during the Giro, one of the sports directors said, we've got a space open at the Dauphiné if anyone wants to do it. We need to fill it. And I remember people used to say, you know, sometimes you come out of a grand tour and you're absolutely pinging after a few days of rest.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, well, why not give it a go? So you get 6 days between the Giro and the start of the Dauphiné, and I wasn't pinging. Like the first few days, I just thought, I am so tired. In fact, I remember speaking to one of the sports directors and asking if it was all right to stop and get off the bike. I was just so shattered, and he told me to keep going. I think I just pulled out on the final day in the end. And then they asked me if I could do the Tour of Austria in July, and I said, look, I'm so shattered, I need a longer break.
Yeah.
And about 2 days after that, they rang me again and said, Heinrich Hauser's got a knee injury. We need somebody to replace him. Can you do the Tour de France? And I was rooming with Jez Hunt at the time at the National Championship, so it must only have been a week before the race. And he said, just go for it, because when he'd been a youngster with Benesto,
mm-hmm.
he'd turned down a place at the Tour de France when he was fairly first few years as a pro.
Yeah.
And then never got another opportunity until 2010, which was another 14, 15 years later.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you're never going to get another chance, so just go for it. So I said I was too tired to do the Tour of Austria, but I was fine to do the Tour de France. So then we...
Do you think if you weren't teaming roommates with Jez, do you think you would have said no? Like, I mean, the reasonable thing at that point is you are completely shattered. Like, a week-long Tour of Austria seems outlandish.
I think even without Jez, I would have been fairly conscious that I might never get another chance to do it.
Yeah.
You know, by that point in my career and my life, you know, you kind of know where you are in the pecking order, right? And that you might be able to make small improvements, but not jump across a big chasm.
Yeah.
So I probably would have said yes anyway. I actually felt I got a message from Adrian Timmis, who'd done the Tour de France as a really young pro with a small British pro team, the only British team that had done the tour before Team Sky came along, mm-hmm. ANC Halfords. And it kind of broke him. But I remember him writing to me and saying, look, with what you've done already, just barely do anything between now and the start of the tour. You're not going to gain anything. You just want to be as fresh as possible. Mm-hmm. I actually felt all right the first few days, but I crashed on that stage that Cancellara tried to neutralise. In fact, the reason he tried to neutralise it was because Andy and Frank Schleck had crashed on this slippery descent, and I'd crashed into them just behind them. And I suffered a bit with that injury, like a sort of groin injury I had just after that. So yeah, by the time I got to the end, I was really on my knees. I remember Lorraine, my wife, came over with Ralph to Paris at the end. And on the Monday, you know, wanted to go sightseeing, and I just couldn't think of anything worse. I dug myself quite a deep hole. Yeah. But I'm glad I did it. Sure. Yeah, it's the one everyone's going to ask about. Well, you're a cyclist. Yeah. Did you race the Tour? What are your main memories of the early days of Cervélo? How old were you when the team started? I was 25. So at the time, that was quite young, wasn't it? It was. Yeah. I mean, yeah, these days it's hard to make your European debut at 25. I mean, on the whole, it's just the team was ahead of its time in terms of beyond the peloton, the transparency of opening up the doors that seemingly most teams now have, that sort of like, hey, here's a sneak peek. I mean, shoot, it's sort of it's an early, what we see with Netflix, Unchained kind of thing. Here's the stories behind the story. And the aero equipment, it seems like I went from Cervélo, where we had, I remember picking up my cycling jersey and thinking, this is now appropriate for my 5-year-old daughter. And the kit is so aero. And then I went to Liquigas afterwards, and my sizing for Liquigas was, I met our general manager at the 2010 World Championships, and Roberto Amadeo said, we shook hands and said a few salutations, and he said, oh, you're about the same size as Daniel Oss. So I just got everything Daniel Oss size. So just the priority of sponsorship, of sponsor relations, rather, being ahead of his time, and then anecdotes within a Grand Tour. Like, I remember what was the Cinque Terre time trial? A 60-kilometer time trial over 2 or 3 mountains.
Similar story to the introduction to the team, in that your roommates with Carlos Sastra, and my first roommate was Tor Hushoff. I'm just like, are you joking? What is this? Overall, just really great memories. I think with most teams and teammates, you see the guys afterwards a couple years later in the peloton, whatever, and you have a good laugh. But with that group in particular, I think there was tremendous chemistry.
Yeah, I mean, it was really, that, and then Garmin Cervélo, which came for me in 2011, was one of the lucky few that got taken across.
Yeah.
It's my only real experience in a top level team, those 3 years. But for that reason, it's quite nice when you hear from some of the riders that had been pro in a total of 15, 16 years, that they also look back quite fondly at Cervélo. It seemed to be quite a special team, even if you'd had, experience in plenty of others. So
yeah,
I don't think it's just us that were, eyes in the headlights because it was our first opportunity at the big time. I think it genuinely had a sort of a shine that has continued to shine ever since.
Yep. One last one. You mentioned our first year in 2009 was a particularly hot year. I think we had like 10 minutes of rain through the whole tour or something like that. And I was roommates with Vladi, and he, old school Ukrainian, who's like, we don't use air conditioning. So every stage I would race back to the hotel to turn on the air conditioning to cool the room down from 38 degrees centigrade down to, 36 for a quick sliver of a second. Because, air conditioning is going to make you sick, according to old school thinking.
Yeah. It's funny to think back of all of those, unwritten things of how they used to do it basically in the old days. It had just been passed down through generations.
Absolutely. So I made the comment earlier about your July being busy, but rather than taking a uneducated guess, can you tell me what your July looks like with your role at GCN?
It's not too busy now that my role's kind of changed. So obviously, whilst we had GCN Plus, I was looking after a lot of the racing side of things, and then commentating and doing some punditry myself at the same time. Whereas now that I'm GCN Plus is no longer, I'm back full time with GCN I was always full time with GCN, as in fully employed by them. But whilst we were owned by Warner Brothers Discovery, my role was a bit different. Just concentrating on the YouTube side of things, which is the core part of our business. So I'm actually off to Lille next week on Tuesday to try and pick up as much content as we can, before the race starts, because once they get going, it's very difficult to get much with the teams.
Yep. Because
they're so busy. There's so much media attention. There's just not a lot of time for us to fit in and do much content. I'll be picking up as much as I can next week, and then after that it will be just the usual stuff, like the racing news show on a Monday.
Yep.
We record the GCN show that day as well, and then the other videos that we do over the rest of the days. Tour de France preview next week before the race starts. So standard stuff. So I'm not too much more busy than I am for the rest of the year, but the whole year is quite busy because we obviously put out a reasonable amount of content every single week. Yeah.
That's what you led with it there. The main thrust of what GCN does is YouTube content. Is that correct?
Yep.
And how about, describe a typical week versus this week coming up, which you hit some of the main points. How many regular shows are published in a traditional week, and what does scripting a show look like? What does traveling to, when you do the Canyon SRAM and Alpecin de Koenig sort of reality show, making your position onto the team, how does that fit into the grand plan?
So we try to plan quite a long way in advance in terms of the stuff that's not the regular weekly shows, and try to make content that we think is going to be most relevant for the time of year for the cyclists that are watching. And we also try to make content that's going to appeal to a broad range of cyclists, whether it's tutorials, which we're doing a little bit less of, but we're still trying to do basic stuff that people just getting into the sport can learn from.
Yeah.
And that's not obviously something that we are intending everybody to click on, because if you've been cycling for more than a few years, you've probably already learnt that. So a typical Monday for me is quite busy. So I'll get into the office at 7:45 in the morning and spend a couple of hours writing the racing news show. Sometimes I will have made some notes from the week before, but I've always watched most of the races, so a lot of it's in my head anyway.
And let me interrupt you there real quick. So that's where you're behind a desk, and is there a teleprompter where you're reading 90% of the words that come out of your mouth on screen, or how?
Yeah, there is for the racing news show, and that. So I can't remember how many years through from the start of GCN we started doing that show. But the idea behind it was, on a Monday when Brits get to lunchtime and Europeans, they've got this recap to watch, which is a summary of the racing from the week before, and hopefully then when people over in the US and Canada wake up, they've got something to watch before they go to work, etc., or on commute. Mm-hmm. But because it needs to be written on a Monday, filmed on a Monday, edited, and then out onto YouTube, it's quite time pressing. And so we decided to try doing an auto cue for that. But before that, we'd never ever used one. And actually to this day, we pretty much just use it for that racing news show, just to speed things up, really. But yeah, I've had many years of sort of writing scripts and learning them, and being a bit more ad lib gets easier as you do it. And also the YouTube has changed dramatically as well. It was good to keep a tight script when we were first starting, because YouTube was such a different place where people weren't prepared to spend longer than about 3 or 4 minutes watching a video. Mm-hmm. It's difficult to remember at this point, but it was much more seen as a sort of throwaway thing that you'd watch on your laptop or desktop, and then you'd go and watch TV for the proper long form content, which has obviously changed to a degree now. So yeah, do that for the racing news show. But that's written first thing on a Monday, and I film it after some meetings at about 10 o'clock normally, and it's edited, and I watch it through to make sure I haven't made any big mistakes, and then it goes up on Monday afternoon. Mm-hmm. And then Si and I will write the GCN show from, will be midday maybe, spend a couple of hours doing that, and then film that in the afternoon. That's then edited on a Tuesday and goes up Tuesday afternoon, evening. So yeah, Monday's always pretty busy, and actually this Monday following, we'll also film the Tour de France preview show, so we'll get 3 done in a single day.
Wow.
So yes, Mondays are not easy.
Sure.
And then the rest of it just kind of depends on time of year, whether I'm traveling. I'm not doing quite as much traveling these days, but just writing and shooting other videos and organising stuff going forward. So that, it's never like getting much downtime, which I quite like.
How about, so you and I caught up not too long ago in the aftermath of Unbound, where you reached out saying, hey, can you give a couple words about the speed that Unbound has sped up, quite frankly, over the past decade. Yeah. How long would something like that take to script and write together? And then sort of what is the movie magic? Like where that was shot, it looked like you and Si are almost sitting on like a beach. Is that teleprompted, or is that the two of you going back and forth and the bullet points of what you're trying to say?
Yeah, we did use the teleprompter on that occasion. Reason being, that was another busy day. So we got together with our international presenters for a few days. So we've got a French channel, Spanish, German, and Italian. And we went to Menton near Nice in France. I actually went the day before because we've done this get together once before. We flew on a Monday, and trying to write the racing news show and the GCN show it just was hard. Yeah. It was like a long day, and then traveling and filming them both as well. Sure. So I said, well, I'd like to go out on a Sunday so I can spend Monday morning writing them, and then I'm not going to start the week shattered. As it was, my flight was delayed 6 hours, so I didn't get to the hotel until 1 a.m. So it sort of backfired on me. But the other guys getting there, they were delayed on the Monday as well. So I'd written everything between, 7 in the morning and 2 or 3 in the afternoon. But we couldn't film it until 5 p.m. So I had to do race and news show, and then to speed things up, we used the teleprompter for some of the GCN show just at the start. Yep. But for the most part, we try to avoid it. I think we've been presenting long enough where it's more difficult to tell, but it seems a bit better, I think, when you're when you're not reading off a screen.
Yep. Understood. I think of you as wearing many hats, and it's doing the race commentary, and then something like this particular one. It wasn't long ago that you were doing in-race commentary. When did you put that aside? And was that sort of just a timing thing? Was it a simplifying thing? How did that come about? Or is it also, this also fits into the bigger picture of like ownership, and not to overcomplicate things there, but you have GCN, and then there's TNT and Max and Eurosport, and the common fan like myself quickly becomes lost in the weeds.
Yeah, well, I mean, the number of different names there are around, Warner Brothers Discovery for the cycling channels, it's confusing sometimes, even when you're in the business. I'll try and sort of take you through that history without going on too long. So Discovery, as they were at the time, took a stake in our business reasonably early on, like I'd say maybe after 5 years or so, like a minority stake. And then they upped that to about 70% back in 2019, I think it was. And eventually they owned 100% of us. So when we first got a majority stake from Discovery, we had all of these plans, making GCN Plus, making this app, and other stuff going down the road, and they were like completely backing it. They could see that we had like a really concrete cycling audience and a passionate audience, and us having live racing would work for them, and they were really pushing it. And then at some point over the next year or two, they merged and acquired Warner Brothers. And with that, I don't know, $58 billion of debt, I think it was, something around that, certainly in excess of 50 billion. And around that time, their strategy changed. So what they had been doing was acquiring a lot of what they call verticals, which are like brands that are into a particular niche, us being cycling. I think they'd acquired a cooking channel and various other bits and pieces. And they were trying to then acquire them, build them up to be more profitable, etc. But once they did the merger, they changed strategy to trying to get more onto one platform. The idea being that they, the more they can, more entertainment, more sport, etc., they can get onto a single subscription service, the more likely people are willing to part with their money every month, and the better the chance of competing with the Netflix and Apples and Amazons of this world, which is not an easy competition to take on. But which I think it was the right strategy for them. There was a point where, as commentators, we were saying, "Welcome back to GCN Plus, Eurosport, and Discovery Plus." I think that was the only three, but it still sounds confusing, right? So it was sad for us, and I think it was sad for quite a few cycling fans, especially in the States and Australia, where everything had been pretty much in the same place. But yeah, we understood what the decisions that they had to make, which are never easy ones at that level. Yep. It's a level far above my pay grade. Anyway, eventually they wanted to sell us, and my former boss, or my current boss, should I say, Simon Ware, who was the founder of GCN and Play Sports Network, which is all of the YouTube channels, he eventually bought the company back last May, so a little over a year ago. At which point I had to make a decision whether to sort of stick with GCN or go with Warner Brothers. And I wanted to stay with GCN because I've been there from the start and sort of in my blood at this point, I think.
Makes sense. And when Simon Ware purchased it back, had he not done that, do you think it would have gone to the next highest bidder, or was there a time that GCN was at risk of evaporating?
Well, I think that might well be part of the reason why he wanted to buy it back, because I think there was that risk, that they'd spent millions acquiring us, but those millions are pittance compared to what they're used to dealing with day to day. And it's not that they can just do that all the time and not care, but when push comes to shove and they've changed strategy, if it comes to a point where they're trying to sell a company like ours and there's no bidders, it's probably going to be cheaper for them to dissolve the company rather than continuing to rack up debt if it's a company that's loss-making, as we were. I mean, just to caveat that, we were loss-making because we were following the strategy that we'd agreed with them, which was going in the right trajectory. It's just that things changed at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in answer to your question, I think, for him, having built this company up from scratch and seeing it become such a big success, it would have been horrible to watch it just go down the pan. So I think he just didn't want to see that effectively.
Yep. That makes total sense. So cycling is a part of your life for the majority of your life. You have your racing career, your current job revolves around cycling. There was a period not too long ago that you were away from the bike. You were not riding. What precipitated that?
Well, it was when I finished cycling full time, being paid to ride a bike. In the sort of interim period after that, I realised why I had enjoyed it in the first place, or what I did it for. And my conclusion was that I liked to have a training plan, tick all the boxes, do the intervals, just try and be the best performing cyclist that I could be, and hopefully from that get the best results that I'd ever got. And I think when that was no longer there, I suddenly didn't feel like I had a reason to go out on the bike. I wouldn't say I've ever got to a point where I've gone out and hated it, unless the weather was that horrible. I mean, there have been points where I've been out on the bike since being a pro and just thought, why am I doing this? Like, I've done this. It's pissing down with rain. I'm freezing cold. I'm not enjoying it one bit. But for the most part, if I had gone out, I didn't get back and think, well, I hated that. But I also didn't get back thinking, I can't wait for the next ride, or when is the next ride? And so just for the longest, I've always loved watching racing. I've always loved doing the commentary. Like, I didn't fall out of love with cycling from that point of view. I just felt no reason to go out on my bike myself. Mm-hmm. And I'd also say that I kind of lived my 20s in my 30s in many respects. Like, I've always liked to drink, and obviously when you're a professional rider, you can only do it every so often. I mean, it was a bit more often in our day than it is now, but it was still few and far between. Mm-hmm. And when I stopped, I just thought to myself, I can do it whenever I want now. Like, I don't need to perform from a sporting point of view. Yeah. And for some stupid reason, it took me a good decade to realise that there's also like a health consequence as well as a performance benefit to not drinking. So it wasn't like I wasn't doing nothing from an exercise point of view. I was always like walk the dog and stuff, and I did a bit of running here and there, but tend to always get injured. Mm-hmm. But I just didn't ride my bike regularly, and I didn't really want to ride my bike regularly. And then, this time last year, I started to... I wanted to make some changes, so I did a whole health series on GCN.
Right.
But I still didn't really ride my bike much. I went to the gym a lot, started running quite a bit, cut down a lot on drinking, and... But it wasn't because I felt really bad. I just looked at my lifestyle and thought, I feel like I'm getting away with it now, but it's not like a good long-term strategy. Because I think a lot of people, when I made that series, thought, you must have been in a deep, dark place and needed to make some big changes. I loved my 30s and early 40s. I was having a great time. Like I just looked at what my lifestyle looked like and thought, I probably need to change this for the benefit of longevity and trying to sway my odds back in the favour of living a long, healthy life. And then recently I've got back on the bike because I'd agreed to do this charity ride, which was last Sunday, and I have enjoyed it, but the reason I've enjoyed it is because I got a training plan through and I could stick to it, and I saw improvements, and I felt quite good on the day of the event. So it was kind of mission accomplished. But if I don't have that, then I don't have a love for the bike, which I know a lot of people find quite sad. But it's just the way my mind works, and everybody's different. You've seen it a lot, I'm sure, with ex-pros that you were teammates with. Probably half of them don't want to see a bike again, and the other half carry on riding quite a lot because they realise that they just love riding a bike. It helps their mind, it helps clear their mind, etc. So you just get two sides of the coin, in my experience, from watching pros retire. Yeah, agreed. I guess it was different for you, was it? Because you filtered straight towards gravel racing when it was emerging. You still had aims and ambitions.
Yes and no. I mean, my last World Tour year, or whatever we called it then, Pro Tour, was 2015. and I stepped into the ambassador role and working with companies and so on and so forth, but I wouldn't put gravel racing, I don't think we would use that term for the first year or two. Racing wasn't a priority, so I was doing exactly what you said of really embracing my 30s. I retired at 32, and it was like, I can just ride a bike because I enjoy riding a bike, but I mean, I had a beer in my hand without fail at 5 p.m. every single day for the next 5 years. Whereas,
oh, really?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I
just one a day, or
no, multiple. I mean, I was never drinking to excess, but exactly your point. It's like, it's not. I don't think of alcohol as performance enhancing, and so for me, it was just simpler through my career to say, okay, I'll have a few in the off season, but I need to basically be cold turkey in season. And then it was making up for lost time. And I'm, like I said, I'm not drinking to get hammered every night, but yeah, I love when 5 o'clock rolls around, and it's only recently to answer the question of like, okay, gravel racing has gotten really competitive, and here I am as a 42-year-old on occasion still trying to be competitive with people who are 22 years old, that I say, shoot, I need to get off beer for a week, and that's a stretch. And
oh, really?
Yeah, is that performance enhancing? I don't know, but it's certainly a good check on the checklist to say, okay, I've done things right this week in preparation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so I stepped into a job after racing that involved riding a bike a lot, which was great because then I could live the life of excess, but then also burn those calories. And it is what it is. How about, I mean, like you said, it goes full circle. Like you said, what motivated you was having a training plan. And then you lose that for a while, but then you built it up again this year in preparation for this 200-mile ride. Were you doing it also for, correct me if I'm wrong, you qualified for the UCI Gravel Worlds, is that right?
I did, yes, although that was a story in itself. So we were doing this video for the new Canyon suspension forks, and Connor did it at the tracker in Spain, but they basically got mugged in their car on the way back from Spain and got all of the footage nicked.
Brutal.
So all of a sudden we didn't have a video for these suspension forks, and I was basically plan B. So they asked me if I would do this Gralloch event in Scotland about a week before the event. So I looked at the forecast because Scotland can be pretty cold and wet.
Yeah.
Looked amazing. So I said, okay, well, yeah, I'll give it a go.
Yeah.
And I think mainly courtesy of about 1 million punctures, which I steered clear of, I managed to qualify for the Gravel World Championships. Yeah. So which is great because I've got a reason to stay training until mid-October now, because that's when the Gravel Worlds are. But yeah, I really don't know what I'll do after that. I might go back to running. I've still carried the gym going, but I haven't got time for running at the moment.
Yeah.
But I think it's been a long enough gap now where I'm no longer comparing myself to what I was doing power-wise before when I was full-time. Mm-hmm. I'm just looking at what my baseline is when I start and seeing how much I can improve it. To what end, ultimately, I don't really know, but we'll see.
That's great because, yeah, that can often be the detriment. When you know what you were previously capable of, and then you go out and you're doing a fraction of that, you can be like, oh, this is terrible. And then you need to jump all the way back in, which is, literally is impossible without the altitude camps and the full monk lifestyle. So it seems like you have a healthy relationship with cycling, at least through October. And I love the story of how you qualify for for the Worlds. How about...
Well, I'm in the 45 to 49 age category. I don't turn 45 until another month and a half, but it's the UCI categories work. It's what you're at the end of the year. So I guess I should make the most of it whilst I'm the youngster in the group.
Sure. Exactly. Good move. You touched on it a tiny bit. Are you a fan of the sport? Is it hard to present an unbiased opinion? And maybe also sort of thinking back to the racing commentary days, is it easy to just deliver an objective point of view in your current role, or do you end up having some bias, both with racing and then products that you're using?
In terms of racing, do you mean like watching the racing?
Either. I mean, maybe. I mean, on your Monday race report, like, do you find yourself saying, I like Pogačar more than Vingegaard? Do you say, I like this canyon instead of this specialized bike? I mean, how much bias do you have internally in that? I mean, presumably you're not presenting it, but is it hard to be a fan of particular people or brands or things, or is it just sort of muted?
Well, it's sort of two different questions, really. It's certainly two different answers anyway. So we actually did a video on, we did the GCN show a couple of weeks ago on how GCN makes money. Mm-hmm. For those people that didn't hear it, it's a multitude of ways, but the biggest revenue stream comes from long-term partners. So Canyon have sponsored this for donkey's years across all of the channels internationally as well. Pinarello and Orbea also have long-term partnerships, and the thing is, they're all really good bikes and they're great companies to work with, and we believe in their products. Yep. Wahoo's another one, Park Tools, the list goes on and on of people that we've worked with, but importantly for us, they've trusted us and invested in us for a long time, which allows you to run the company without worrying month to month or even year to year sometimes that there's going to be enough money to pay everybody's wages. So that's how we work. But what we've also said on that show is that we've turned down quite a lot. And sometimes we turn stuff down because we don't think the product is something that we would choose to use, where we, not in the fortunate position where we don't have to pay for stuff. We've always tried to be honest in that regard, in that we're using stuff, we're not reviewing it because we can't, because we're paid, the content's paid for, or there's partnerships. But it is a genuinely good product, and if it wasn't, we wouldn't be using it and we wouldn't be showing it to you. There's then the YouTube revenue from advertising and memberships, and anyone that's got a YouTube premium subscription, we get a proportion of that based on how much of our content you watch, etc. And then a couple of other bits like merchandise in the shop and stuff, but that's really the core of the business and how it works. So yeah, I probably am biased in terms of, I've only got access to those 3 bike brands and I haven't used some others for quite a long time. But between the 3 of them, I wouldn't say I've got any particular preference, because they're all making absolutely fantastic bikes, which we have the privilege of using. Mm-hmm. And on the racing side of things, I do have my own favourite riders, and I do try to not allow that to come across in either commentary before or in the racing news show, etc. now. And I know I've done a good job of that, because I won't name names, but you'll sometimes get comments like, why do you hate on this guy so much? Or, and the name can change from week to week. So I think, well, I must be doing all right at this, because this week they think I'm a hater of this person. Next week it's someone else, and I'm favouring the person they thought I hated the week before, etc. Yeah. And then in commentary and punditry, I am a sort of sit on the fence kind of person anyway. Like in TV, they really like you to have a strong opinion in one direction, because it gets the fans talking and online, and either they're in your favour or they hate you because it's completely the opposite of what they think. Yeah. So actually, Lloyd's quite good at that, and Robbie McEwen's good at that, because they've got a strong opinion. Mm-hmm. And I'm not particularly strongly opinionated person, because I tend to see things from both sides. I mean, I don't think it helps to sell myself on TV, because I say, well, yeah, I understand that, but then you have to think about it from the other side of the fence, which is he might have been thinking this, that, or the other. So yeah, I try not to come across as being too one way or the other on any particular subject, which has its upsides and its downsides. Yeah.
Terrific answer. So in your current role, observing racing, trying equipment, surrounded by cycling, what is something that excites you in the sport? Is it technology? Is it watching modern racing? Is it disc brakes? Is it making fun of the UCI's recent rule?
For me, for a long time, it's been racing. I've always just really loved watching racing, and even when I've not been working on a race commentary, I'll try and keep my eye on it and watch as much as I can. And I just think that racing right now is brilliant. I was really fearful during the Team Sky years that mountain stages, that Grand Tours were going to be an utter bore fest for forevermore, to be honest. Based on what I knew of physiology and my own training and knowledge of training, it made perfect sense to me that if you figured out that your FTP was at a certain level, and that was about the highest in the world in terms of power to weight, that you would never go after an attack, because that person's gone into the red, and if your train carries on at the same kind of power to weight ratio, they'll pay for their effort, they'll come back, and then they'll probably get dropped. So I just thought, this is not looking good. We're just going to get attacks in the last kilometre when riders know they can go into the red, and by the time they've blown or they pay for it, they've pretty much crossed the finish line. And so to start seeing these attacks from way out, and successful attacks where initially you're just thinking, what the hell are they? You remember the Amstel Gold 2019 where Mathieu van der Poel won?
With his kilometre-long attack, sprint?
Yeah, but before that in the race, I'm going to sort of reveal one of my favourite riders now, because I've been waiting for Van der Poel to race more seriously on the road. Like, it was so clear from cyclocross especially, but also mountain biking and his small forays into road racing, that he was incredibly talented.
Yeah.
So I kept yearning for him to do these big races just to see how he got on. So I remember really looking forward to that 2019 Amstel. And then he attacked from what felt like so far out. And I rewatched it recently, and I think actually it was only about 45, 50 Ks, But it just goes to show you, back then you just thought, what on earth are you doing?
Yeah.
Like you went with one other rider, went with him. He wasn't a known name, but he wasn't that great. I think you're just fucking your race up here. Like, you're going to get caught and spat out, which is basically what happened. But it ended up making one of the best races in history, because he got caught and then spat, but never gave up and gradually went back through the groups and then won in the most incredible of styles. But I think just recounting that shows you how much different racing is, because we did used to just wait and wait. And I say we as professionals, but also we as viewers, wait for something to happen. And it just took so long. And I kind of understood, I thought, the reasons behind it. But seeing these guys now just going for it so much, I mean, I'm glad I'm not in the sport now. Like, I feel like I made the most of what I had at the time. And I actually feel like I was a bit ahead of a lot of people in terms of how to train and other aspects of performance, etc. And now I wouldn't even have that advantage. So my sort of limited talent compared to properly talented people would have left me floundering at the speeds they're going now. But I think it's great to watch. I know a lot of people have got bored with the same sorts of people winning, but I'm still so in awe of how they're able to do it. I'm still at this point finding it quite interesting.
Yeah.
Long answer to your question, but I really enjoyed the racing side of things and watching that.
Another great answer. Yeah, I remember when Van der Poel and Wout were getting into the sport on their smaller teams at that point, and just their history off-road indicated that they were going to be good on-road, and my goodness, from the beginning, they've been just a spectacle to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, imagine how many people those two have brought into the sport.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I was talking to Florian Vermeersch not too long ago, and he made a joke, but in jest and in seriousness, how Wout's training will be front page news because of what the analysts at the local newspaper can glean from his Strava. Like, yeah, when that lands in the newspaper, that's gonna draw on a handful of people from cycling.
That's why I felt so bad for him when Nielsen Paulus won whilst Orlando.
Goodness.
I just thought, oh God, like, wow, he's already being criticised left, right, and centre. Like, it's just going to be horrific for him if he looks at any kind of media over the next 24 hours / 24 days. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's massive. Yeah, it's massive in Belgium, but always has been, obviously. But I think, stars like him and Van der Poel basically living in Belgium, and I think they probably try and claim him as their own at points. But that rivalry, I think that those two rivalries really, like him and Van Aert, a lot of people would say now that it's no longer the rivalry it once was on the road.
Mm-hmm.
But also Gacha, Vinigor, it's that keeps you coming back to racing. It's that gets more people into it. And it's quite rare that you have a genuine rivalry like that lasts as long as it has done. Like often you think back and you think there's been rivalries in the past, and this is something that Kelly's got all the data from. And when you actually hone down on how many races they did together, it's nowhere near as many as you remember. But this current era, those rivalries they're fascinating, that's for sure.
Yeah, fascinating and special, right? Without one, were it just one or the other of either of those athletes, maybe drawing a lot of people in, but the fact that they're going head to head in a variety of cycling disciplines has made it very interesting. Well, in an effort to give you your Thursday afternoon into evening, we're going to wrap up with 3 questions. You've ridden your bike all over the world. What is your favorite place to ride a bike? What is one place that you'd like to ride your bike that you have never ridden? And with whom would you like to go for a bike ride, share a conversation, share taking in the scenery, whatever it is? So, favorite place to ride?
These are not questions that I've pondered much over the last sort of 13 years or so.
Spontaneity, baby.
I would say Tuscany is my favourite place to ride. I expect you must have spent a reasonable amount of time there, but it just has all the types of terrain that you could possibly want, the best food you could possibly want, generally reasonably good weather, and even some gravel. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Strade Bianchi being from there as well. What was the next one? Person I'd like to ride with.
Where would you like to ride that you've never ridden a bike?
It would probably be somewhere in the States, I think. Although, what was the Eastern European country I looked at recently? I'm not going to be able to remember which country it was. I've been really fortunate in terms of how many places I've got to ride because of that Asian team that I raced for. I had like Indonesia, Taiwan, Thailand, a couple of places in China. And obviously I've ridden around Europe a lot and a couple of places in Australia. Yeah. But I've not ridden in the States that much. Yeah, Colorado I did. I never did tour California, although I have ridden there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of a specific answer to that one. As you can probably tell, I don't spend much of my time looking online for cycling holidays. And I think I'd probably find the same thing with trying to figure out who I would like to ride with.
They need not be a cyclist. You know, they could be. We had Winston Churchill was an answer recently. Oh, yes. They also need not be alive.
He was my hero when I was younger. I reckon Slash from Guns N' Roses.
159 times I've asked that question, give or take. And that might be the best answer yet.
I loved Guns N' Roses when I was a kid. And Slash is still so good now. Like yeah.
Terrific answer. That's going to be impossible to top, so I'll leave it at that. Daniel, Lloyd, thank you very much for your time, for your insight. Appreciate the conversation, for spending a couple of years with me at Cervelo TestTeam. Really nice to catch up.
Absolutely my pleasure. Yeah, it was great to catch up with you, Ted. Like you said, twice in a few weeks after many years of no contact, but glad to see you well, and let's speak soon.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, Dan.